When HOA President Patricia called 911 on me for parking at my own ranch, she smugly waited for the cop to arrest me. Her face went white when the sheriff's deputy stepped out and said, "Morning, Dad." She had no idea Karma was wearing a badge. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. The morning sun painted the Texas sky in shades of gold as I stepped onto the wraparound porch of my ranch house. At 72, I still loved watching the sunrise over the rolling hills that had been my home for 38 years. My name is Frank Martinez, and this old ranch has been my sanctuary since I bought it back in 1987. I never expected that peace to be shattered by a woman named Patricia Hendricks. The trouble started when the city expanded and new housing developments sprouted like weeds around my property. What was once open countryside became Willowbrook Estates, complete with an HOA that seemed to think their authority extended beyond their own neighborhood boundaries. Patricia Hendricks was the HOA president, a sharp-faced woman in her 50s who wore her authority like armor. She had platinum blonde hair that never moved in the wind and wore pantsuits that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. From day one, she made it clear she didn't appreciate having an unsightly ranch bordering her pristine neighborhood. The first incident happened on a Tuesday morning in September. I was loading hay bales into my old pickup truck when I heard the click of high heels on gravel. Patricia marched up my driveway like she owned the place, clipboard in hand and fury in her eyes. "Mr. Martinez," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "We need to talk." I set down the hay bale and wiped my hands on my jeans. "Morning, Mrs. Hendricks. What can I do for you?" She gestured wildly at my property. This eyesore is bringing down our property values. The HOA has received numerous complaints about your vehicles, your equipment, and the general state of this property. I looked around at my well-maintained ranch. Sure, it wasn't manicured like the cookie-cutter houses behind the fence, but everything was clean and functional. "Ma'am, I've been here since before your neighborhood existed. This is my property and I maintain it just fine. That rusty truck, those farm implements scattered around, it's unacceptable. You need to clean this up or we'll be forced to take action." My blood pressure spiked. "Take action? Lady, you have no authority here. This isn't part of your HOA. Patricia's face reddened. "We'll see about that." She spun on her heel and marched away, heels clicking like an angry woodpecker. I should have known that wouldn't be the end of it. Over the next few weeks, Patricia escalated her campaign against me. She filed complaints with the city about everything from my excessive noise, which was just me starting my tractor at 7 a.m., to claiming my property was a health hazard because I had a small chicken coop. Each frivolous complaint meant visits from various city inspectors who found nothing wrong but still had to document the calls. I was getting frustrated, but I tried to stay patient. After all, I dealt with difficult neighbors before. But Patricia wasn't done. She organized a petition among her HOA members to have my property declared a nuisance. She even had the audacity to offer to buy my ranch for a fraction of its value so she could clean up the neighborhood. When I politely declined, telling her the ranch wasn't for sale at any price, her harassment intensified. The breaking point came on a crisp October morning. I had parked my pickup truck at the edge of my property, about 3 feet from the fence line that separated my ranch from Willowbrook Estates. I was unloading supplies for a fence repair when I heard that familiar click of heels. "Mr. Martinez." Patricia's voice was shrill with righteous indignation. "You cannot park that eyesore there. It's ruining our view and violating HOA regulations." I straightened up slowly, my patience finally wearing thin. "Mrs. Hendricks, for the last time, this is my property. Your HOA has no say in what I do on my own land. That truck is practically on the property line. It's an eyesore and a safety hazard." I measured the distance with my eyes. The truck was clearly on my side of the fence, well within my property boundaries. "It's my truck on my land and I'll park it wherever I damn well please." Patricia's face turned an alarming shade of purple. "We'll see about that. I'm calling the police. You can't intimidate me with your aggressive behavior." "Aggressive behavior?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Lady, I'm standing on my own property, minding my own business. If that's aggressive to you, you need to get out more." She pulled out her cell phone and dialed 911 with dramatic flair. "Yes, I need police assistance immediately. There's a man at 1247 Old Ranch Road who's being aggressive and parking illegally. He's threatening me and won't move his vehicle from HOA property." I could hear the dispatcher asking questions, and Patricia's voice got more hysterical with each answer. "Yes, he's very large and intimidating. No, I don't feel safe. Please send someone quickly." I shook my head in disbelief. Here I was, a 72-year-old man in overalls, apparently so threatening that she needed police protection. "They're on their way," Patricia announced smugly. "And when they get here you're going to learn that you can't just do whatever you want." I leaned against my truck and crossed my arms. "Fine by me. I've got all day." We stood there in hostile silence for about 10 minutes before I heard the rumble of a diesel engine coming up the road. A sheriff's patrol unit rounded the bend, its light bar catching the morning sun. Patricia straightened her blazer and put on her most innocent expression. "Finally," she muttered. "Now you'll see." The patrol car pulled into my driveway, and I felt a familiar warmth spread through my chest as I recognized the driver. A tall, broad-shouldered man in his early 40s stepped out of the vehicle, adjusting his Stetson hat as he surveyed the scene. Sheriff's Deputy Miguel Martinez, my son. Miguel had been born when I was 30 and had grown up on this very ranch. He'd learned to ride horses before he could properly walk, helped me fix fence posts as a teenager, and had always dreamed of serving his community in law enforcement. After 4 years in the Marines and 2 years at the police academy, he joined the sheriff's department and worked his way up to senior deputy. He was also the kind of man who took his oath seriously and wouldn't show favoritism, even to his own father. "Morning, Dad," Miguel said with a slight nod, his voice professional but warm. Then he turned to Patricia. "Ma'am, you called about a dispute?" Patricia's eyes lit up like Christmas morning. She clearly didn't realize the connection between us. Miguel had his mother's darker complexion and had taken her maiden name professionally to avoid any appearance of nepotism in the small county where everyone knew everyone. "Officer, thank goodness you're here," Patricia gushed. "This man is parked illegally on HOA property and was very aggressive when I asked him to move. I don't feel safe." Miguel pulled out his notepad and pen. "Can you show me exactly where the vehicle is parked that you believe is in violation?" Patricia practically skipped over to my truck, her heels clicking on the gravel. "Right here. This rusty old thing is clearly on our property. It's an eyesore and it's against HOA regulations." Miguel walked over to examine the situation. He looked at the fence line, then at my truck, then pulled out a small measuring tape from his utility belt. After taking careful measurements, he made notes on his pad. "Ma'am, can you show me the exact property boundary?" he asked Patricia. "It's obviously right here at the fence." Patricia pointed dramatically at the chain-link barrier. Miguel nodded and made more notes. Then he turned to me. "Sir, do you have documentation showing your property boundaries?" I walked over to my porch and retrieved a folder I kept handy for exactly these situations. Inside were my deed, a recent survey, and property tax records. I handed them to Miguel, who reviewed them carefully. "Ma'am," Miguel said to Patricia, "according to these documents and my measurements, this vehicle is parked approximately 4 feet inside this gentleman's property line. The fence appears to be built slightly inside the property boundary, which is common to avoid disputes." Patricia's face flushed. "That can't be right. The HOA wouldn't have built the fence in the wrong place." "I'm not saying it's in the wrong place," Miguel explained patiently. "Property owners often build fences a few feet inside their actual boundary to avoid any issues. But the fact remains that this vehicle is legally parked on private property." "But it's violating HOA rules?" Patricia insisted. Miguel's expression remained neutral, but I caught a slight twitch at the corner of his mouth. "Ma'am, HOA regulations only apply to properties that are actually part of the HOA. According to the county records, this property at 1247 Old Ranch Road is not part of Willowbrook Estates and therefore not subject to your HOA's authority." Patricia's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. But the complaints? The eyesore? Property values? "Ma'am, someone parking a vehicle on their own property is not a police matter, regardless of anyone's opinion about the vehicle's appearance." "What about him being aggressive toward me?" Patricia demanded. Miguel turned to me. "Sir, were you aggressive toward this lady?" I shook my head. "Deputy, I was standing on my own property loading supplies. When she complained about my truck, I told her it was my property and I could park where I pleased. That's the extent of our interaction." Miguel made more notes. "Ma'am, did he make any threats? Use any profanity? Make any physical gestures toward you?" Patricia's face grew redder. "Well, no. But his tone was very intimidating." "What exactly did he say that you found intimidating?" Patricia stammered for a moment. He said he could park wherever he damn well pleased." Miguel wrote this down. "So he used mild profanity while discussing his rights on his own property. Anything else?" He laughed at me. "Laughing isn't a crime, ma'am." I could see Patricia's frustration building to a breaking point. She wasn't getting the result she'd expected from calling the police. "This is ridiculous," she exploded. "You're not taking my concerns seriously. I pay taxes. I vote. I demand to speak to your supervisor." Miguel remained calm. "Ma'am, you're welcome to file a complaint with the sheriff's office if you feel I've handled this improperly. However, based on the facts as I see them, no crime has been committed here." "What about harassment?" "He's been harassing me for weeks." I spoke up. "Officer, if anyone's been harassing anyone, it's been the other way around. This lady has filed multiple false complaints with the city, tried to get my property condemned, and has been trespassing on my land to take pictures for her complaint file." Miguel raised an eyebrow. "Is that true, ma'am? Have you been coming onto this property without permission?" Patricia's face went white, then red again. I was documenting violations." "Ma'am, entering someone's property without permission is trespassing, regardless of your reason. Do you have permission to be on this property?" "I don't need permission. It's practically in our neighborhood." "But it's not actually in your neighborhood, is it?" Miguel asked calmly. Patricia realized she was digging herself into a hole. "I want to file a complaint against both of you. This is obviously corruption. You're protecting him." Miguel's expression didn't change, but his voice took on a slightly harder edge. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to calm down. Making false accusations against the law enforcement officer is a serious matter." "False accusations? You're clearly biased." This is when Miguel made his move. "Ma'am, I want to make sure I understand your complaint correctly. You're saying that I'm showing favoritism toward this gentleman. Is that correct?" "Yes. Obviously." Miguel nodded slowly. "And why do you think I would show favoritism toward him?" Patricia's eyes narrowed. "Because you're probably from around here. You probably all know each other in this backward place." "Ma'am, you might be more right than you realize." Miguel's voice remained professional, but I could see the slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I do know this gentleman quite well." Patricia perked up, sensing victory. "I knew it. This is a cover-up." "Ma'am, I know him well because Frank Martinez is my father." The silence that followed was deafening. Patricia's mouth fell open, and her face went through several color changes like a chameleon. I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing. Your father?" Patricia whispered. "Yes, ma'am. Born and raised right here on this ranch. And I can tell you that everything I've told you today is completely accurate and by the book. My father is legally parked on his own property, has committed no crime, and has every right to use his land as he sees fit." Patricia looked like she was about to faint. But this is corruption. Nepotism." Miguel shook his head. "Ma'am, what would be corruption is if I falsified a report or ignored an actual crime. What I've done is respond to your call, investigate your complaint thoroughly, and determine that no laws have been broken. The fact that this gentleman is my father doesn't change the law or the facts." He paused and looked directly at Patricia. "However, what I'm concerned about now is this pattern of harassment you've described. Filing false police reports is a misdemeanor. Trespassing is a misdemeanor. And if you continue to abuse the 911 system with false complaints, you could face charges." Patricia's face crumpled. "This isn't fair. He doesn't belong in our neighborhood." "Ma'am, he's not in your neighborhood. He's on his own property that he's owned for decades, since before your neighborhood existed." I finally spoke up. "Deputy Martinez, I want to make something clear. I don't want any special treatment because you're my son. But I would like this harassment to stop. I'm an old man who just wants to live peacefully on my own land." Miguel nodded. "Dad, I understand. And ma'am, I want to be very clear about something. This gentleman has the right to use his property as he sees fit, within the law. If you continue to file false complaints, trespass on his property, or abuse emergency services, you will face charges. Do you understand?" Patricia nodded weakly. "Furthermore," Miguel continued, "I'm going to document this entire incident in my report. If you call 911 again about Mr. Martinez parking on his own property, you will be charged with filing a false police report. Is that clear?" "Yes," Patricia whispered. "Good. Now, is there anything else you need from me today?" Patricia shook her head and started walking toward the fence line. Then she stopped and turned back. "I still think it's not fair," she said weakly. Miguel sighed. "Ma'am, what's not fair?" "He gets to do whatever he wants just because his son is a cop." This time Miguel's patience finally showed some cracks. "Ma'am, My father gets to do what he wants because he's doing it on his own property and he's not breaking any laws. If you owned property next to a neighborhood and someone tried to tell you what you could do on your own land, how would you feel? Patricia didn't answer. Have a good day, ma'am. And remember what I said about future complaints. After Patricia trudged back to her house, Miguel and I stood in comfortable silence for a moment. You handled that well, son, I said finally. Miguel chuckled. Dad, I've been dealing with HOA complaints for years. They're usually about barking dogs or lawn height, but the principle is the same. Property rights are property rights. Think she'll back off? For a while. But people like her don't usually give up completely. Just try not to provoke her, okay? I laughed. Son, I was just loading supplies. If that's provocative, I don't know what to tell you. Miguel shook his head with a grin. Fair enough. But maybe park the truck a little further from the fence line? Just to keep the peace? I'll consider it. But I'm not being run off my own land by some HOA busybody. I wouldn't expect you to be. Miguel glanced at his watch. I need to get back on patrol. But Dad, I'm proud of how you handled this. A lot of people would have lost their temper. Your mother raised you to be better than that. No point in stooping to her level. Miguel hugged me goodbye and drove away. I watched his patrol car disappear down the road, then looked over at the fence line where Patricia's house stood. Her curtains were drawn, but I had a feeling she was watching. Over the next few weeks, things were blissfully quiet. Patricia's complaints to the city stopped. Her hostile visits to my property ended. I began to think the whole thing was over. But I should have known better. 2 months later, I was in town getting supplies when I overheard a conversation at the hardware store. Patricia was talking to another woman about that horrible man with the ranch, and how she was working with a lawyer to find a way to force me to sell. That evening, I got a phone call from Miguel. Dad, I thought you should know, Patricia Hendricks filed a complaint with the sheriff's department about my handling of the call at your place. What kind of complaint? She's claiming I showed favoritism and that there should be an investigation into our family's criminal enterprise. I nearly choked. Criminal enterprise? Son, what criminal enterprise? Miguel laughed. According to her complaint, you're running an unlicensed junkyard and I'm protecting you because we're family. She wants the state police to investigate both of us. That's ridiculous. Dad, it gets better. She also filed a complaint with the city claiming that your property is being used for illegal agricultural activities in a residential area. I've got 2 horses, a dozen chickens, and a vegetable garden. I've had the same setup for 30 years. I know, Dad. But she's not giving up. My sergeant wants to meet with both of us next week to go over everything and make sure all the paperwork is clean. The meeting with Sergeant Williams went exactly as expected. He reviewed Miguel's report, looked at my property documents, and shook his head. Frank, I've been in law enforcement for 25 years, and I've never seen someone go to these lengths over a neighbor dispute, he said. Your son handled this completely by the book. Mrs. Hendricks is wasting everyone's time. What happens now? I asked. Well, the state police aren't going to investigate a criminal enterprise that consists of parking a truck on your own property. And the city has already told Mrs. Hendricks that your agricultural activities are grandfathered in and completely legal. Sergeant Williams leaned back in his chair. But I'll tell you what concerns me. This woman has made it personal. She's not just complaining about your property anymore. She's trying to get your son in trouble for doing his job. That crosses a line. 3 weeks later, I was working in my garden when I heard a commotion from the direction of Willowbrook Estates. Shouting, car doors slamming, and what sounded like an argument. I walked over to the fence line and saw 2 patrol cars in Patricia's driveway. Miguel was there, along with another deputy I didn't recognize. Patricia was in handcuffs, screaming about her rights while being loaded into the back of a patrol car. Miguel saw me watching and walked over. What happened? I asked. Remember those complaints she filed about you running an illegal business? I nodded. Well, turns out while she was so busy investigating your criminal enterprise, she forgot to pay attention to her own activities. The IRS got a tip that she was running an unlicensed tax preparation business out of her home and not reporting the income. My jaw dropped. She was committing actual tax fraud while accusing me of running a fake business? Gets better. The city inspector who came out to investigate her latest complaint about your property noticed that she had converted her garage into an office without permits. When they looked into it, they found she'd been operating an unlicensed business for 3 years. So she's been breaking actual laws while trying to get me in trouble for imaginary violations? Miguel nodded. The IRS is very interested in her unreported income, and the city is fining her for the unpermitted construction. Plus, she's facing charges for filing false police reports after they found documentation that she knew her complaints about your property were groundless. I watched as the patrol car carrying Patricia drove away. Think this will be the end of it? Dad, she's looking at federal tax charges and multiple local violations. I think she's got bigger problems to worry about than your truck. 6 months later, Patricia's house went up for sale. The new owners, the Johnsons, turned out to be lovely people. When they moved in, Mrs. Johnson came over with a plate of cookies and apologized for whatever trouble the previous owner might have caused. We heard she was quite difficult, Mrs. Johnson said with a smile. We just want you to know that we're happy to have a real ranch for a neighbor. Our kids are fascinated by your horses. I invited the whole family over for a barbecue the following weekend. Their 2 young children, Emma and Jake, were thrilled to meet my horses and collect eggs from the chicken coop. It reminded me of when Miguel was their age, running around the ranch and learning about animals and responsibility. Mr. Martinez, little Emma asked as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, why did that mean lady not like you? I thought about how to explain it to a 7-year-old. Well, Emma, sometimes when people are unhappy with their own lives, they try to make other people unhappy too. The lady who used to live in your house thought that if she could make me change my ranch, it would make her feel better. But that's silly, Jake chimed in. Your ranch is cool. Mrs. Johnson smiled. Out of the mouths of babes. That evening, after the Johnsons had gone home, I sat on my porch with a cup of coffee and thought about everything that had happened. Patricia had tried so hard to force me off my land, to make me conform to her vision of what the neighborhood should look like. She'd filed false complaints, harassed me, tried to get my son in trouble, and made my life miserable for months. But in the end, her own dishonesty had been her downfall. While she was so focused on my imaginary crimes, her real crimes had caught up with her. The irony wasn't lost on me. She'd called the police on me for parking my truck on my own property, never realizing that the deputy who responded was my son. She tried to use the law to force me out, only to discover that she was the one breaking the law. Miguel stopped by later that evening, still in uniform from his shift. How are you doing, Dad? He asked, settling into the chair next to me on the porch. Good, son. Really good. The new neighbors are nice people. I heard you had them over for dinner. Barbecue. Their kids love the animals. I paused. Miguel, I want to thank you for how you handled everything with Patricia. I know it wasn't easy, having to stay professional when she was attacking both of us. Miguel shrugged. Dad, that's the job. You taught me a long time ago that doing the right thing isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. Your mother would be proud of you. She'd be proud of both of us. You could have made this whole thing a lot worse, but you kept your cool and let the system work. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars come out over the ranch. This land had been my home for nearly 4 decades. I'd raised my son here, buried my wife in the small cemetery on the hill, and weathered storms both literal and figurative. Patricia Hendricks had tried to take that away from me, but she'd failed. Not because I fought back with her tactics, but because truth and patience had won out in the end. Dad, Miguel said suddenly, I heard Patricia's moving to another state after she gets out of jail. Good for her. Maybe she'll find some peace wherever she goes. Miguel looked at me with surprise. After everything she put you through, you don't hold a grudge? I thought about it for a moment. Son, holding a grudge is like carrying a hot coal in your pocket. It doesn't hurt the person you're mad at, it just burns you. Patricia was a miserable woman who tried to make everyone else miserable too. I hope wherever she goes, she finds a way to be happy without trying to control everyone around her. You're a better man than I am, Dad. No, son. I'm just an old man who's learned that life's too short to waste time on anger. This ranch, this family, our neighbors, that's what matters. Patricia was just a storm that passed through. The important things are still here. As if to prove my point, one of my horses whinnied from the pasture, and we could hear the soft clucking of chickens settling in for the night. Tomorrow morning, the sun would rise over the same hills it had risen over for thousands of years, and I'd be here to see it, coffee in hand and peace in my heart. That's the thing about home, it's not just a place on a deed or a piece of property you own. It's where your roots go deep, where your memories live, and where the people you love know they can always find you. Patricia Hendricks had learned the hard way that you can't force someone off their roots. And my son Miguel had learned that sometimes the best way to serve and protect your community is simply to stand up for what's right, even when it's personal. As for me, I learned that sometimes the best revenge is just living well and letting karma take care of the rest. The ranch is still here, the family is still strong, and the neighbors are now people who appreciate the simple beauty of horses grazing in the morning mist and roosters crowing at dawn. And every morning when I step onto my porch with my coffee, I remember that this is exactly where I belong, not because some HOA says I can be here, but because this land and I have chosen each other, and that's a bond that no amount of harassment can break. The last I heard, Patricia found herself a nice apartment in a city far away, where she doesn't have to worry about ranches or pickup trucks or chickens. I hope she's happier there. As for me, I'm exactly where I've always belonged, home.